Let's carry on and welcome to this webinar on the new indexing and some of the changes and improvements we did with the 9.2 release. 9.2 of Dynamicweb contained some new features related to the index itself, and we continue to add a lot of new features to the indexing engine as we start using it for more things. It also, in this version, comes integrated with the old Smart Search engine because this is now being part of the PIM system that we are starting to develop with Dynamicweb, so you can use this for searching products that you need to edit. So that's the reason why we have some of these new things coming in. On another note, I can tell you that the indexing also receives some other improvements, not only related to e-commerce, which is where I focus today, but you also see some updates to the content in the index builder, and we also created a file index builder that you will see soon as part of the application, so you can search the file system using the index, not the contents of files, but everything in the file system and folders and so on. But let's take a look at some of the things that you received in 9.2, and I'm just going to go through some of the details and implementation of these features, and you can just ask questions as we go along on this. First of all, we improved some usability. In the user interface, you'll see a major update of how the user interface is working. In Dynamicweb 9, it's an overall improvement. And we also added some things that can help you set up the searches to be more precise. And one of them is this one you can see on the screen down, which is a term selector. So when you set up a search on a specific field, you get this list of terms that is actually in the index on this field. And you can see the number of occurrences that you have it. You can use this, of course, to see what kind of data you have, but you can also use it to set up searches targeted at specific terms that we have in the database, so you don't have to guess what you should write in these fields. And these terms, they basically show the information that we have directly in the index, but sometimes in the index we have some keys instead of the values. So that would go for group ID as one example, or a manufacturer ID as another example. And guessing the right group IDs or guessing the right manufacturer IDs is, of course, rather difficult when you set up the indexing. So by using the term selector instead, you actually get some help on that, because on top of the term selector, we have something called a value mapper. So in this situation, we're looking at a query against the manufacturer ID, and which in the index we only have IDs like menu 1, menu 2, and so on, but that will not help you a lot in the user interface. So what these value mappers do, they add some contextual information on top of these values. So if I have a field called manufacturer ID with these menu 1 and menu 2, this value mapper will look up some useful information for the user interface, and that's where we see cube and trek in this user interface. So we actually get two different pieces of information in this part of the user interface. And these value mappers, they work on some fields like the group ID and the manufacturer ID and variant IDs and stuff like that, that is related to e-commerce. And you get also another benefit from it. That's when you're using these fields for facets in the front end. You get a list of facet options, and they have a value and a label. And until now, the value has been for many fields and the label has just been the same thing. And these value mappers take over the responsibility of mapping the values to a label that is more relevant to the user in the front end as well. So we did some hard-coded value mapping in the old index, for example, for manufacturers or group IDs, but for a lot of the other information in the index, we didn't do that. So you have better keys and values, or values and labels in the facets in 9.2. And these value mappers is something that you can build yourself. So if you index some weird stuff in in the index, and that is the raw data. That could be a custom product category field that you have a specific format that you receive from external source, and you want to translate that into some more user-friendly labels. In the faceting, you can create a code, a value mapper, which is a simple extensibility point, and you can get that in. And I have a question. Yeah, a useful feature. That was the question. So I think you're gonna be happy for that specific feature. I'm gonna show this live in just 1 minute. Another list of things that we released with the 9.2. There's a support for balancers in the user interface now. Before 9.2, balancers was something that resided on the configuration files only. I'm going to tell you when we go to the demo what a balancer is. And another thing we added also in this release, it's both on 9.2 but also in the 8 branch actually, is the support of partial builds for e-commerce. That means that if you have a large index, we have customers with up to 1 million products in the catalog. Instead of running a full index every time, you just run an index against all products that has been updated in the past 24 hours and stuff like that. So you get a quicker update of your index instead of waiting for the entire build. On the operator side, we added a new contains operator. The existing one we had is called contains, and the new one is called contains extended, and I'm gonna show you the difference in just a minute. There's only one thing to be aware of, is that this new contains extended is a bit slower than the other one, and you have to be careful about it. More on that in the demo. We have on the operator values, the term selector I just showed you. We also have something called a code provider, and that is a configurable add-in that you can use on the right side when you create a query. So instead of adding a specific value when you define a query on the right side, you can now have a configurable function being executed. The first provider that we have added to the system that you can use right away is a datetime code provider that will be able to do dynamic date creation. So give me everything that is older than 24 hours. That is what this code provider can do. And I'm going to show you in just 1 second how it works. So that's enough for the PowerPoint. So let's go take a look at the indexing itself. So the first thing you'll notice in 9.2.091 is the updated user interface. It was cleaned up quite a bit. Apart from that, it does the same things as you're used to. If we take a look at the indexing first, this one has been changed quite a bit, so it's more clean and easier to comprehend what's going on. So one of the first changes major changes we did is we changed the fields. So these are the fields that you defined yourself, and then you have the schema extender fields in a section for yourself instead of having to expand it. So this is making it a bit easier to take a look at what's going on here. Let's take a look at the first new feature, which is the balancer that you can choose from the ribbon bar up here. And currently there are 2 balancers available for indexes. We have something called active passive, which is the one we've run on until now, and we have something called last updated. A balancer is in a situation where we have 2 different indexes like this one. I have an A and a B index available, and let's say I update just the first index. That means that this one now is newer than this one. Until now, this one, the active passive, is the way that we chose which of these instances that the index should run on, that all the queries in the front end should work on. And it takes the first one, which is currently not locked, not looking at the date at all when they were built. And that usually works fine because you usually build all your indexes in a row. So first you build the first instance, and once that's done, you build second instance. And the active passive balancer will just take the one that is not being built, or anyone which is available when you are doing searches. But if you're in a situation where you don't update all your instances all in one, it could be that you had a third instance that is used for, I don't know, a testing purpose or something like that. You would have sometimes the search switching to that one. And you can change that to go to the last updated balancer, which will always give you the newest build of these instances. That might be a benefit. The downside of this is it has a minor performance impact going to this one because more calculations has to be done, and it involves reading from the disk. So there's a minor performance loss on switching, a couple of milliseconds mostly. Another change is I have two different build actions down here. I have a full build, which means we are building everything in the index. We delete all the products in it and rebuild it from scratch. And then we have this one, which is an update builder action that we have available in here. Means that we update all the products in the index that has been changed in the past 24 hours. I can set this to 1 hour or 24 hours or whatever. And the way this one works is that it cures all the products that has been changed within the hour specified in here and updates that. So if I run this index builder twice, just after each other, it will actually update the same products 2 times. And a very pragmatic way to do it, so we don't have to keep track of which products has been updated and which ones has not been updated. And this is of course much faster when you have a lot of updates in your solution, or if you have a large index than running the full indexing available. You can also see we have some more settings available here. I'm not going to go into details about that one. There's one interesting setting right here called empty string replacement, and that means if we are indexing a field from the product catalog that doesn't have a value, that could be a field with no string related. The way Lucene handles that is by not indexing that field, so the field will be missing from the index, so you cannot search it actually. So you cannot search for products that has an empty string in the index. So what you can do here is you can actually write the text null, or this has no value, and what Dynamicweb will do, it will index this value into the index instead of not indexing the field, and then you can search for the string this has no value if you want to find products that doesn't have a value. So that's one example of a useful feature, and might be a little weird way to work, but that's how Lucene handles empty strings. If we go on and take a look at some of the things going on in search instead. I just need to check if I remembered everything. Yeah. On the search, I have a big one right here. We can have a look at some of these things. We match, in this situation, a lot of the parameters that we've defined up here. So if I add an expression of group ID or groups, let me see if I can find it. And I set it to equal something, and I have these new features out here. So I have, the first one is a term selector, and right now I can see I get, instead of group IDs, because this is a group that has an ID of something below it, we look at this up with the value mapper, so we get the group names instead, and I can see I have 21 products in the group called road bikes and clothing and so on. So this is a much easier interface to find products that is in the groups road bikes, clothing, and bikes. Below this one, it actually says group IDs equals group 1, group 2, group 3. That's what it's translated to once doing the search. So this is much easier to work with compared to the old way of handling all of this. So taking a look at the other feature, the code value provider. Let's see if I have an updated date somewhere down here. I have something which is a date time, and I can say I want something that is greater than a specific date. So I have these code, which is, there might be some user interface related to this, but I can take a date time provider. So I'd say, give me everything that is greater than 2 hours. So everything that has been updated in the past 2 hours will be found in this query. So instead of writing some kind of weird statement down here as you would in the Smart Search and other places in our system, we introduce this one, which is, this is a provider, it's a piece of code, and these are the parameters of that configurable add-in, and that will translate into something useful. So we will take the date of today plus 2 hours and add into that one. And I can also say minus 2 hours, of course. And that is what it will search when we do this. And these providers can do anything. You can have any kind of parameters that you want to configure, and the provider itself can return everything that needs to be calculated on time. It does resemble a little bit about the macros, which is, I have something called a page view, which returns the ID of the context, but this is not very dynamic, and it doesn't have any settings. So these are more static variables where the code providers are a little more configurable and can do some more dynamic calculations. So you can use these for more advanced scenarios and where you need to use them with different configurations. Another thing I want to show you is the contains operator. I have this one, contains extended, which has been added to the system. So let's take a look at how this works in the front end. I have a search right here. I have 173 products, and if I search for something, I have search for goose, and I have mongoose bike, and I find this because if we take a look at the text, I have goose as a free text there, and I have it out here as well. So these 4 products are being found because the name goose is part of the product description down here. If I search for ooze, I don't find any products at all, and that's because the way contains work is that it looks for not things that starts with actually. So I can search for goo and find all the things that I have in the index, but I cannot search for ooze and find the things that I have in the index. So, and the big difference between contains and contains extended is how that works. So let me add a new expression to this one and search for the same field, the free text, and I can say contains extended and look at for the same parameter in here. I'll just save it. And if I run my query again, I will find everything that contains, that means G-U-S in here, and I can also do stuff like this. And of course, this can seem very powerful, but I can also find everything that has an O in it, which is basically more or less every product in the index. It looks powerful, and it is in some situation, but it's not recommended to do this unless you really have a good reason. And first thing is that you basically fuck up the scoring that Lucene adds to the documents, and that's one downside of this. Another thing is that usually you oftentimes find things that you don't want to find. So in this situation where I set it up to look at everything that we have in my free text field, which is every description and so on, we get a lot of false positives, and we get a lot of search results which are maybe wrong. So a better way to use this one would be on specific fields where we know people search for part of the information. That could be the product number, for example. So product number contains extended, the parameter I'm searching for, that would make better sense. And the other thing that can be dangerous regarding this operator type is, instead of using the index to look up the results, which is pretty fast, and why Lucene is fast, this one has to scan the index. So it iterates through the all the indexed terms on the given field to find all the document that matches. On small indexes like this one, it's pretty fast. You don't see any difference in performance. But if you had 750,000 products in your index, and you indexed all the descriptions for all of these products, you would have a very large term index on that field. And of course, iterating over millions of terms on that field is a lot slower than doing like this on a small field or on a small index. So you have to be aware of performance on this one when you use it. So you also will receive a warning soon in the user interface when you add a contains extended to your search, just to make sure that we tell you about this. So use it because it's powerful, but also be careful because it can impose some dangerous things. And at least be aware not to use it many times, but only once, and make sure you have a field with all the things that you need to search in this way, so you don't have to do it multiple times on the same search. I think that's pretty much it for this webinar. There are other minor features that has been added as part of this release, so you can see that in the release notes. And apart from that, you're going to see a lot of new features as well in the next release, which is 9.3 coming in August. And last thing I have to say today, we have questions about integration scenarios. If the e-commerce provider from data integration update the updated time of the product out of the box, so that update builder action would pick it up. Nuno, I have no clue. I don't know if the e-commerce provider, I think the e-commerce provider will update the updated date, but I'm not sure the Dynamicweb provider will do that on the index. And I would not recommend, when you run a full integration or run an integration once a day, you should rebuild your index at least once a day anyways, even though you have an update partial. And the reason for doing that is because Lucene will leave the old documents in the index and basically just mark them as invalid. So if you run 10 updates on 10% of the product catalog, you would basically end up with all the products twice in the index. So the index will grow when you use the update builder action. So it's good for maintaining the index during a day for all the things that is happening, but every once in a while, maybe once a day or once a week at least, you should rerun and re-index the entire thing. So. And what is the use case for the new facet rendering option? I don't think that has been released yet, has it? Let's take a look at. Oh yeah, this one, Adrian, you're asking about the render type. And this one is basically just a simple text string. That's true, I forgot that we add to the rendering, and this is so you can do some conditional formatting in your razor template. So if you have a facet that is you want to render as checkboxes or radio buttons and so on, you can basically specify it from the user interface instead of having to look at the system name in in the Razor template itself. So it's basically just a helper value that we send out to the rendering so you can do it more dynamically. Okay, that's it for now. I just want to make sure that you see that we have the Dynamicweb Summit, which is the new version of the tech conference that takes place in September on the 28th and the 29th here in Aarhus. And it will be a technical program as you're used to, a lot of coding, keynotes, and networking, and all of that. The new thing this year is that we also have a commercial track on this conference, and you will see tracks that are related or relevant for sales personnel or project managers and stuff like that. So make sure that you save the dates and also follow the newsletters to see what's going to be on the agenda as we go along. So that's it for today. Thank you for attending this webinar, and I'll see you next week. Bye.